WWE debut can go one of many different ways. Talents can have an amazing dreamlike debut for the ages, such as those enjoyed by Kane, Chris Jericho, and the Nexus, if the stars align and the company can be asked to put the effort in. Conversely, a debut can go horribly wrong, with a number of factors potentially responsible, but the outcome giving the debutante an obstacle to overcome right from the off. Good or bad, the important thing in the end is that a debut is memorable. You might crap your pants and forget your lines or trip and accidentally fall off the stage, but at least people will be talking about you. And in the mental world of show business, that is a good thing. The one thing you don't want to have is a debut that is met with indifference. To make a maiden appearance before the public and have them yawn or change the channel or go online and make comments about how you are destined for mediocrity. A debut is supposed to be a big time event, especially if the performer has a proven track record or a ton of untapped potential, but sometimes even great wrestlers can introduce themselves to a whole load of so what? I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 underwhelming WWE debuts for great wrestlers. Join us. Number 10, Steve Austin. Before he became Stone Cold, Steve Austin was decidedly lukewarm, debuting for WWE not as the beer-drinking, hell-raising rebel that we all got suspended at school for imitating, but rather the Ringmaster, a man who was the, Master of the Ring. And that's it. That's the character. Ringmaster. Master of the Ring. Not even a cool Masters of the Universe type play on it or anything either. Just a bloke with a buzz cut in green kegs. The Ringmaster debuted as the protege of Million Dollar Man Ted DiBiase, who presented him with the $1 Million Championship during the Brother Love show on the January 8th, 1996 episode of Raw. He then cut a generic promo about the upcoming Royal Rumble and let his manager end the segment with his catchphrase as you could hear the sound of everyone in the arena wondering when the Godwins were due out. It was a totally nondescript way to introduce a totally nondescript character. A week later, the Ringmaster would make his in-ring debut, beating Matt Hardy before he was famous in an average squash match with the $1 Million Dream submission. He sure mastered the ring with that one. The Texas Rattlesnake would, of course, reverse his fortunes by the summer, but you wouldn't think this man should wrestle at WrestleMania, let alone main event a bunch of them, watching his WWE debut. Number 9, Colt Cabana. Colt Cabana probably wishes he was given something as promising as the Ringmaster upon his arrival to WWE. The independent wrestling star was well traveled by the time he signed a contract with the organization in the spring of 2007, having performed for just about every promotion going for the best part of a decade. Cabana, a versatile talent that could do serious and comedy and was well versed in a variety of wrestling styles, could and probably should have been a big asset to WWE. However, after spending over a year in the developmental system, WWE brought him to television without a care or a plan in place. Cabana, now going by Scotty Goldman, debuted on the August 22nd, 2008 episode of SmackDown, facing the Brian Kendrick, a man he was very familiar with from his time as a weekend warrior. What could have been a really good and competitive back and forth match was, instead, a squash, Kendrick getting the win after about 2.5 minutes. With a debut like that, it's not exactly shocking that Goldman's few follow-up appearances were quick losses to more established stars. There was a decent bit of buzz about what Cabana could do in WWE, but his brief tenure there showed him go from boom boom to bust bust. Number 8, The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate Warrior got over thanks to his high-energy demolition jobs, where his entrance lasted about as long as the in-ring action itself. Considering he sprinted to the ring for his entrance, that should tell you just how long the matches usually went. It was a successful formula and helped disguise Warrior's weaknesses while presenting something wildly energetic for the short time he was in front of a crowd. Add to that the pulsating guitar music, wild hair, and neon-drenched outfits, and it's no wonder that he was able to capture the imagination of fans, even if they only saw him for a couple of minutes. For Warrior's debut on the October 25th, 1987 edition of Wrestling Challenge, though, the hair wasn't quite big enough, the music was non-existent, the colours were relatively muted, and get this, the man walked to the ring. Sheesh. He was still gassed to the gills, and his inset video promo was as unintelligible as ever, but this was a clunkier, less well-defined version of the walking cartoon character we all grew to know and love, and then reject for his genuinely unsettling opinions and erratic behaviour. Warrior naturally beat opponent Terry Gibbs in short order, and the crowd gave a token cheer, but the second coming of Hulk Hogan, this was not. Number 7, Kofi Kingston. Throughout his decade-plus run in WWE, Kofi Kingston has accomplished much, capturing multiple titles, including the WWE title, and forming one of the most successful and beloved groups of all time. A key to Kingston's longevity has been his consistency. You can always count on Kofi to give you a good match or an entertaining interview, or throw a good pancake, or, well, whatever it is you want him to do. Despite growing into one of WWE's dependable veterans, Kofi was once a young upstart in banana yellow trunks and spoke with a dodgy Jamaican accent. Debuting as part of the New Superstar Initiative for WWE's version of ECW, Kingston got the vignette treatment before making his bow on the January 22, 2008 episode of ECW on Sci-Fi in a match with local wrestler David Owen. Kingston, who managed to get in a few of his signature moves in the short bout, would have looked much better with a different and better opponent. Owen, who looked like a stock video game creator wrestler with his naff tattoos and generic gear, was clearly nervous and inexperienced, moving and bumping awkwardly, including landing on his head and neck from a simple monkey flip. Kofi got the win and got to show off his athleticism, but a clunky squash on WWE's C-Show was not an amazing win to show off a surefire future Hall of Famer. Number 6, Trish Stratus. To be fair, when WWE signed Trish Stratus in 1999, they couldn't have possibly known that the blonde bombshell would go on to be one of the best female performers ever, helping to revolutionize women's wrestling before there was even talk of a women's revolution. Trish was a big name in the fitness modeling world, and WWE were more interested in her, physical assets than in her hammerlock technique. Though she did have a basic amount of wrestling training, WWE instead put her to work as a manager not too long after she had put pen to paper. Walking out to scout Test in his match with Gangrel on the March 19, 2000 episode of Sunday Night Heat, Trish did little more than stand on the entrance ramp looking pretty. An easy night's work for somebody who would probably win a beauty contest after a sleepless 3-day bender, but Trish's evening wasn't over yet, because she had to do it all over again, this time in a different outfit for Prince Albert's match with Joey Abs. And thus TNA was born. How apt that fans were kind enough to chant "We want puppies" on both occasions. Stratus's first televised match was a little more memorable, teaming with her clients to beat the Hardy Boys and Lita on an episode of SmackDown. Number 5, Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle initially thought he would be coming to WWE as the clean-cut, pure sports babyface hero that he had been when he won a gold medal in freestyle wrestling at the 1996 Olympics. And once upon a time, that may have been the case. But it had no chance of happening during the apex of the Attitude Era, which is where the rookie found himself having his first televised debut match. Everything was in place for Angle to make an impression, since the match would be taking place at the 1999 Survivor Series pay-per-view, and it was designed to have him on offense for the majority of it, essentially using opponent Sean Stasiak as a crash test dummy as he threw him around with suplexes and slams. The man in red, white and blue looked the part, but the unforgiving Detroit crowd began their boring chants 20 seconds into the contest. You see, it was around this time that the barroom brawl style favored by main eventers was in vogue and outlandish gimmicks were in. An actual wrestler wrestling an actual wrestling match was something that belonged back in 1970 or something. Hell, if I wanted to watch wrestling, I'd go and watch a wrestling show, not a WWE pay-per-view, pal. The match ticked along and Angle won, but it was an inauspicious debut for one of the all-time greats. Number 4, Mark Henry. Like Kurt Angle, the world's strongest man was another Olympic athlete who was hoping to transition from the world of real sports to a successful career in sports entertainment. Henry had impressed WWE officials with his record-setting exploits in the world of powerlifting, taken by his strength and power as much as his natural charisma and intensity. Like Angle, Henry would also work his first match at a major event, going one-on-one with Jerry Lawler at 1996's In Your House Mind Games. Adorned in the stars and stripes, Henry and the King had a very simple match that was designed to conceal the rookie's lack of experience. After all, he was only 25 years old at the time and had not had sufficient training. He looked nervous and green, but did everything that was asked of him to the best of his abilities at the time. The fans were into him, and he got the victory with a backbreaker submission before wiping out the New Rockers and Hunter Hearst Helmsley in the post-match. Sensing he wasn't quite ready, WWE kept Henry out of the ring and continued with his training before bringing him back as a member of the Nation of Domination. It would take him the best part of an injury-riddled decade to begin realizing his true potential. Number 3, Bret Hart. Bret Hart was one of the superstars of the 90s new generation, but when he walked through the doors of WWE in the summer of 1984, he was one of the lowest guys on the totem pole. He wasn't yet the Hitman and didn't have the shades or even the pink and black. Instead, he was Bret Hart with two T's, an indistinguishable grappler in black trunks and boots. Debuting on an episode of Maple Leaf Wrestling, Bret tagged with longtime partner and rival, the Dynamite Kid, against Iron Mike Sharp and Troy Alexander. According to the man himself, he was coming off knee surgery at the time and was severely limited in what he was able to do. The man who would make a career out of routinely painting masterpieces in the squared circle, the Rembrandt of wrestling was reduced to being one of those sad blokes at the beach who draw you as a caricature for a $5. The excellence of execution got to show a few of his moves, but it was his partner who caught the eye of his boss, being greeted with a hearty handshake and a "that a boy" when the duo got backstage, while Bret got the cold shoulder. Hart assumed that he had failed his audition, but more than made up for the shaky first outing in the years after. Number 2, Batista. Dave Batista got into wrestling later than most, reporting to Ohio Valley Wrestling when he was in his 30s and after he was driven away from the WCW power plant by being told he would never make it in the business. Gee, WCW squandering a potential megastar for no good reason? Well, I never. After a couple of years paying his dues in OVW, Big Dave was called up to the big time, making his debut on SmackDown not as the Batista we all know and are slightly terrified of, or even as Leviathan, his monstrous persona in developmental. No, Batista was brought up as Deacon Batista, the bodyguard of the short-lived and forgettable Reverend Devon. The animal was well and truly leashed, tasked with little more than standing around in a sleeveless suit jacket with a box chained around his neck. Considering the man had WrestleMania main eventer written all over him, it was a curious way to introduce him to the WWE universe. His first televised match was also one that you would struggle to remember, as he teamed with Devon to beat Farouk and a young Randy Orton on a random SmackDown. Standard stuff, but at least he got the win after nearly decapitating Orton with a clothesline. Batista would fare much better after moving to Raw and aligning himself with Ric Flair and Triple H. Go figure. Number 1, Triple H. Speaking of, sometime before he was the smartest and toughest wrestler ever, Triple H was attempting to make a name for himself as a Connecticut blue blood at a time when WWE's fortunes were not exactly on the rise. He had done a similar gimmick in WCW and hoped he could fine-tune it in Vince McMahon's company. As was standard for any new character arrival back then, Hunter Hearst Helmsley got the full vignette treatment, introducing him to the audience before he would wrestle his first match. Now, knowing what we know now about the smartest and toughest wrestler to ever lace up a pair of boots, you would think he would debut in spectacular fashion on a pay-per-view or at the very least an episode of Raw. How about a 20-minute promo to kick off the show, Trips? However, Triple H actually debuted on the April 30th, 1995 episode of Wrestling Challenge, WWE's syndicated B-show, taking on Buck Zumhofe, a man who I would implore you not to research if you don't want to have nightmares for the foreseeable. A routine squash match victory, the game got the win with a cutter, but didn't do too much to make himself stand out as a star. Of course, he's actually going to own the company one day, so he can retcon that and claim that the WrestleMania 18 main event was his first match if he really wants to.